Hi everyone. I'm Yasmin Fahmy, and welcome to NJ Pack's 10 Newark Creators series on Instagram Live. We're interviewing Newark based artists, entrepreneurs, and health workers about their craft and how they're adapting to the pandemic. So, tonight's interview is with Lisa Conrad, and I'm gonna bring her in right now. For those of you who don't know, Lisa is a mom, artist, educator, and founding executive director of the Newark Print Shop. Hi, Lisa. Can you
Hello,
see and hear me very well?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So if you saw last week's interview, you know that Kitab and I like to start with a very positive note. So I'm going to ask you, what made you smile today?
So I'm teaching preschoolers right now during the day, a preschool cohort, including my son. And we went on an outer space adventure. So what made me smile today was the children splatter painting stardust all over their space paintings and also getting it on their clothes a little bit. But it was a lot of
Oh,
fun.
okay.
And class, so it was, yeah, that was a highlight today. Thank you for
That's
asking.
awesome. There's nothing like getting stardust everywhere.
Yeah, oof.
Um, so to kick things off, I think probably a lot of people who are tuning in are familiar with the Newark Print Shop, but if they're not, can you just give kind of like a brief history of the Newark Print Shop and how it was founded and what the goal of the Newark Print Shop is?
Sure. So the Newark Print Shop informally started in 2012. I wrote an Art Start grant to the Newark Arts Council and started teaching printmaking with a small cohort of high school students in my artist studio. And to back up, what led me to do that was I got this artist studio space in a very active building that housed the Index Art Center before they moved, Kevin Darmany's Kadar Studio of Art, and a ton of other artists. And it was very, very inspiring to me. So I was inspired to share the studio space that I had within that building. And that's why I wrote that grant. But after I had the high school students on Saturdays, I had artist friends that were in and out of that building asking when they could use the space. And that's when I just kicked off Print Club sort of informally, like, well, you can use it on Wednesday nights. And I started opening it up on Wednesday nights, and I called it Print Club, put out a bottle of wine on the table, a donation bucket at the front door, and that's pretty much what started Print Club.
That's
And
awesome. So it sounds like it was like really organic and kind of just serving a need that arose in the studio space.
yeah, absolutely. It was completely organic. Newark Print Shop was not a formal entity until a couple weeks into running Print Club as an informal kind of program. And then I started to think about, maybe I should, make this, instead of just a donation bucket at make it a formal. So I registered the Newark Print Shop, a couple weeks into running Print Club, but still we weren't formalized at that point as like a 501c. I didn't have a business plan or anything like that. So it just kind of gradually, really informally grassroots kind of project.
The best things are. So you've been going strong up until I'm sure March of this year was probably shocking to you, like it was to most people. Um, can you talk to me about like where your head was at that time and over the summer around Newark Print Shop?
Yeah, I mean, so specifically around Newark Print Shop, the print shop has gone through a lot. So for the Newark Print Shop during the pandemic and during the shutdowns, we've been shut down before through various reasons. So for the print shop, it's like I knew that that would endure and pick back up in its own time because that's happened in different ways throughout its history. After the first space of the print shop, there was a fire in that building and we were kicked out.
Mm,
And it took us about 7 months to even secure a new lease, and then 3 months to build out that space to even kick back the program. And then it
wow.
moved again two more times. So the Newark Print Shop, I feel like it's just like one of these enduring projects, and it's a meant to be type of passion project that will shift and change and evolve, but in its own way always remain. So when we had to shut down, initially, as everyone thought, it would be for 2 weeks.
Hmm.
Finally, we'd open back up. And then 4 months later, I decided to open up by appointment. So, we just kind of went with the closures. Newark was very strict on his closed. We wanted to um, go along with that. And also, to be quite frank, I was also a public school teacher for Newark Public Schools during the closures. I had to shift quickly and
Hmm.
become a virtual art teacher as well as a homeschool parent for my preschooler. So that was my main focus also. So it was like, shut the print shop down and let me focus on what is it like to teach virtually to elementary age children visual art, and what does that look like with my 4-year-old right next to me. So I mean, that was really my headspace. And the print shop, we were closed to the public. And then I had, a couple key holders, they were allowed to access because they're, studio artists, but nobody else. We were just like, we're just not going to do public programming until it feels right to do public programming. And that was
Yeah.
2 weeks ago when we finally decided to do it. So,
Yeah. That's a huge shift. It sounds like your whole world kind of got turned upside down. Um,
but honestly,
so yeah,
go ahead.
I was gonna say if you can just dig into like what teaching virtually is like, because I think a lot of people who aren't close to teachers or who don't have kids themselves maybe are not understanding how challenging this is, and you have a child yourself. What are some of the things that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis? Oh, did we lose you, Lisa? All right, let's see what's going on here.
Oh, I'm here.
Oh,
Can you
there
hear
you
me?
are. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. All right. So you were asking about virtual teaching. And so
Yeah.
I think that I can say personally, but I also think this was probably what many educators were experiencing. None of us were really trained to be virtual, to do our teaching virtually. Um, there's some higher education virtual teaching happening pre-pandemic, but for the most part, especially like I teach elementary age children, there's no
Hmm.
training for that. So when when we found out we were teaching virtually, it happened, a Friday night. We went home that Friday. There was whispers throughout in the building. I would, ask my supervisor, like, oh, we haven't heard anything. And then that Friday night, we got an automated message from the superintendent of Newark Public Schools. We're not going to school on Monday.
Yeah.
And that was we started virtual that Wednesday. So we just all we're figuring it out as we went. So for me, teaching elementary art, what did that look like initially? It looked like me and my son doing YouTube videos, doing art projects every single day, and then sharing that out to the classroom teachers' emails because that had no way for my kids to even get to me. So we didn't have any setup at that point where do I have a Zoom classroom? Do I have a Google classroom? Do I, eventually
Hmm.
we got to that point, and by the end of the school year, I had a Google website, a Google Classroom, and we were teaching, some live on WebEx. But initially, that first month, I was just pumping out projects via YouTube videos and getting that out to my kids however I could.
Yeah.
So we were just
Yeah.
literally figuring it out as we went and just trying our best to, I mean, for me, I was just trying my best to, you know, put something out there that the kids might help them, do something fun and get their mind off the fact that like our whole lives just shut down, right? Because I'm dealing with little
Yeah.
kids. So that was a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were just all the teachers I knew, we were just figuring it out as we went. And
Yeah, yeah.
that's
And
the end.
actually it was kind of a similar story over at NJPAC. All of our residencies kind of had to switch online very quickly. It was a lot of, teaching artists just recording things at home and then us publishing it and kind of working out the kinks as we went along. So I definitely understand how challenging that must have been.
Mm-hmm.
How were the students responding to that? Like what feedback were you getting from teachers and from kids?
Um, well, it was interesting because I think it was a lot on the families and the children in order, like, it's just so much different channels for them to try to access their teachers and their work. So the specials, you know, the art, the music, the gym, we kind of weren't a priority. For certain kids, they would find us because it really was meaningful to them and it was an outlet. And I could tell that because they would turn in a project like by, you know, 3 hours from me posting it on a video. Or, you know,
Hmm.
once we started doing WebEx, those kids would come every single time.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of kids, I don't even think that because we were switching platforms so much. Like initially it was like us trying to get, you know, there was not, it was a little bit unorganized. And
Hmm.
until we had like a set structure, you know, for how they could get to our work and what was expected, it was like a little late in the game. It was like almost the end of the school year. So I
Hmm.
was getting, I would say, to be quite honest, out of like the almost 600 kids I was teaching last
Wow.
spring, you know, a small handful, I would say 10% of the children handing in my work. I just,
Wow.
oh, what am I going to do? You know, like I'm not failing anyone in the middle of a pandemic. It's not going to happen. And,
Right. Right.
you know, and the kids that were doing it, it was definitely meaningful to them. And some of these kids were turning out amazing work from their houses. And that was a blessing. So I was just focusing on whatever kids that, you know, this is reaching to, wonderful. You know, that's all I can do and
Yeah.
try, you know,
Yeah.
just try to
Did
come up
you
with the most
find
engaging stuff that
the
I
work
could.
that they were, yeah. Did you find the work they were turning in related to the experiences they were going through? Was it very clear in like what they were, the art that they were producing, or not so much?
Not so much. I think more so it was like an escape. Like I was getting a lot, a lot of like, you know, I don't know, especially with the older elementary, they're all into Fortnite and certain games, and they were probably doing that a lot more now that they're home. So their art was reflective of that. I see a lot of Fortnite in their art. Um, so I wasn't, yeah, I would say not too much reflective over like the overall virus or anything like that, but more so about like an escape for them.
Hmm.
At least if I
Yeah.
was to analyze what I was, you know, what I
That
thought.
makes sense. I think that's what a lot of people are looking for right now.
Hmm.
Um, so so I saw last week, last Tuesday, I think you posted that Print Club is back open by appointment, and I just want to make sure we touch on that really quickly before we move on. So, for folks who are interested in Print Club, how do you make an appointment, and then what should they expect when they come in?
Thank you for asking that because it definitely was a shift in how I had to think about that program because for so long, since basically 18, always an open door policy, a drop in, anyone could come and print. And I had to shift my mind and be like, we really can't do drop in right now. We really can't do that because we would fill that space. Some nights people would be screen printing like right on top of each other, like way to capacity of our space. And we just can't do that right now. So um, it took me a minute to like really accept that because that's somewhat what I love about the program is like community building and printing right next to your neighbor that you didn't even know was your neighbor and you know
Mhm.
a child printing right next to like somebody just opened up their own business and just like that mix of community building. But right now I had to accept that what our space and what Print Club program is going to be right now is focus on it still being a resource for people that want to come and print, but in a more personalized experience and not so much as a collective experience. So what does it
Yeah.
look like to do Print Club right now is you have to book your appointment first of all. We're only, you know, we have the space spread out in such a way that when you come for your appointment, you have your own personalized printing area. Um, you're sending us your images ahead of time so we can get your screen and everything ready for you. So when you come, you literally can go to your personal printing station and print as much as you want, as much as your heart's desire. Um, but it's not so much like printing all and like mixing with all these people and having all these people around. We just can't do that. So we have it in such a way that you're booking your time slot. There's only a certain amount of time slots available for a given night.
Mhm.
And you can still print as much as you can and do it yourself printing. We still have folks available there to help, but it's going to be a much more individualized experience and just more low key. We do have, you know, your personalized cleaning and sanitizing and everything set up at your station. to keep it as, COVID friendly as possible.
Yeah, yeah, keep people safe.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely a huge departure. I did a print club when you were still in the Haynes,
Okay.
and it was very much that way you described, like everybody just kind of on top of each other and all like talking and mingling, and that was really what I enjoyed about it. But I
Oh, and
think,
Haynes, like that was like we had there our capacity there was twice as big as where we're at now, and some nights we wouldn't
yeah,
fill it. It was more so
yeah,
almost a print party than like right, like some so packed.
yeah,
I always say it's like networking. You'd get people like we always kept it so it was open door. So even if you weren't there to print, you could still hang out, and it was a good
yeah.
networking. We'd have people come through just to see who was there, what people were working on. Fortunately, we can't really operate now. And I look forward to the day that we can.
Yeah.
But for right now, we still want to be an accessible space to folks and a resource for people to print. And I should add in another, big motivation to open Print Club back up is we um, graciously were awarded City of Newark Creative Catalyst grant this year for their inaugural
Wonderful.
funding. And we wrote that grant on, supporting our print club program. So I really had to think about how can we shift the program and open it back up. And so that's, we're
Congratulations. That's
3 weeks
wonderful.
in and it's been going good.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And hopefully one day we'll be able to get back to that energy where everyone's kind of together.
So,
And so let's jump into kind of like your personal. I know that you obviously don't have a lot of time right now, um, but how did you get into printmaking as an artist, and what inspires you in that creative practice?
so printmaking, I kind of stumbled upon. I was getting my master's in certification in art education at Kean University. And I was fortunate to have I was a graduate assistant there, so I could take all my classes. I had a tuition waiver. And so when I discovered that there was ceramic studio and printmaking studios at the art building, that I could take those classes every single semester to have access to those studios, and it was part of my tuition waiver, I did that on top of my program. So while I was taking my education courses and writing my thesis, I always registered for printmaking and ceramics so that I can access those studios. And printmaking is similar to ceramics in such a way that you need to have access to a lot of equipment, expensive material, expensive tools. And so it makes those particular art mediums very conducive towards communal, a more communal artistic practice than, let's
Mm-hmm.
say, somebody who's an illustrator or an oil painter. You can set that up in your house a lot easier. Not to say you can't set up printmaking in your home. Many artists do
Mm-hmm.
that. But it's more common that an artist will join a printmaking studio because you're not, a lot of artists aren't going to go out and buy a massive etching press or a silk screen setup. So basically that's why I stumbled into printmaking because I just felt so fortunate to have access to these amazing facilities, and
Yeah.
I became hooked. And so I was in the printmaking studio all the time. As actually there was a couple of us at that time that were in there all hours of the night. Artist Dominique Durso, she would be there with me till like 1 in the morning every night. Diana Palermo, these are artists that now are very much part of the artist scene in Newark. But we would spend many nights in that artist building, just having access to those facilities. And so that also kind of sparked my interest to open up my studio space when I got it on Broad Street in Newark, and also transform it into a printmaking because that was at the same time that I was utilizing those studios at Kean and doing my graduate work at Kean. And also what spearheaded setting up that studio on Broad Street was the Newark Museum got rid of a small etching press. It was a tiny table.
Oh, did we lose you, Lisa? Can you hear me?
Because my phone
Yep,
clicked
you're
off.
back. It's okay.
Sorry about that. So the Newark Museum, they got rid of a tiny tabletop Charles Brand etching press. And a Charles Brand press, for any printmaker that's listening, is like the top-notch press. And it was in the dumpster. So we salvaged it and put it in my studio. And that also, like, I felt so fortunate, number one, to have this tiny little press. Number two, to have this, it was a tiny little artist studio, but amongst this creative hive in Newark. And also I was loving the energy that was happening at that Kane University printmaking studio of like this cohort of us just printing all the time together. Like, even though we're all working on our own work, but being in that communal space, that really kind of inspired me and what sparked the, vision to do that and replicate that type of energy in my studio.
That's wonderful. Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting the point you make about printmaking and ceramics being these very communal, those are those are sort of the art forms that are most being, I think, affected by the pandemic because
a glass too, like glass roots, right?
Yeah, glass roots. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about collaborators and who are some of your go-to collaborators in the city and who are folks that you haven't had a chance to collaborate with, but you'd like to.
Okay, so I feel very blessed to be part of the Newark artist community, specifically for the many collaborations that have happened over the years. So I moved to Newark in 2010 and immediately moved into a building that was filled with artists. And so collaborating with artists in Newark has been like a game changer for me. And throughout the years, not only as an individual artist have I collaborated with many amazing artists that have like transformed my life in many ways, but also as an institution, the Newark Print Shop has been so fortunate to collaborate and partner with other, artist-run organizations. And so I think that the Newark art community is very unique and special in that sense that collaboration happens all the time, whether it's one-on-one artists, an artist organization partnering with another one, a grassroots organization partnering with a big institution like NJPAC, so many things, artist collectives, right? So throughout the years, I would say some collaborations that have stood out would definitely be, to stand out, number one would be a collaboration with Jerry Gant that happened before his passing. So the summer, what year was that? 2018. That's when I had found out the Newark Print Shop wasn't going to stay at Haynes, and I was kind of a wreck over that because I was trying to, relocate my organization, and it was a lot of pressure, and I was under a lot of stress. And so I started making these cyanotype clothing, and the cyanotype clothing was based off of the different spaces that the Newark Print Shop has been in, and it was like part of like wearing your heart on your sleeve because this is what I'm going through, and I don't know, it was just the way that I was going through it. And I remember I ran into Jerry Gant on Halsey Street, and he was like, yo, those cyanotype clothes are so dope, can you teach me how to do that? And have Jerry Gant asked me, he's like the apparel king, like, are you kidding me? Of course. So we started doing some cyanotype clothing. That led to, he was like, yo, we got to do a photo shoot, and then we got to do a whole fashion show. Well, a lot of the, the projects that we were envisioning didn't happen, but the photo shoot happened at Shine. And that was a collaboration with also Jillian Rock and Christopher Davis, who you interviewed last week, and Gary Campbell ended up coming through, and it was a very, very magical moment in my history, and also just wow, like collaborating with Jerry Gant, anybody who has, it's just amazing because he's amazing. But like things like that happen all the time in Newark. Especially if you're living and working in Newark. So I don't actually currently live in Newark. My son and I live in Montclair right now. But for 10 years, I was living and working in downtown Newark, and you'd run into artists all the time. And that these kind of spontaneous and magical collaborations happen so frequently. And that's part of the, something that's kind of amazing about being part of the Newark arts community.
Yeah, yeah.
That's example, but right now my main collaborator is my son. So all summer we were making art. I called him my co-teacher. When the Montclair Art Museum asked me to teach virtually for their summer camp, I was like, I will absolutely do it, but my son has to be my co-teacher. Yeah. And they came on board. They sent him a staff t-shirt and everything. So I introduced him to the kids. Hey, this is Mr. Jolly. And so he's been my collaborator. Of course, we're like, we've been
I
home,
like that.
ever since March, there's been no separation. And also right before the pandemic, 2 months before, we started working on these screen prints together because he's 4 and he just turned 4 in May. So at around 3.5 is when his drawing skills really started to get very unique and expressive. That's a very amazing age for children. 3, 4, 5, their drawing skills really start to, especially if you nurture it. Oh my God, it's amazing. So I started looking at these drawings that he's doing. I'm like, we got to turn these into screen prints. So we started doing multicolor screen prints of his drawings, and that's been a major collaboration too. So pre and during the pandemic. So he's like my main collaborator right now. But many artists throughout my time in Newark, for sure. Can't speak
Yeah,
for,
yeah.
everybody, but there's just been so much amazing energy. What makes Newark so special to be an artist and part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to explore in this series. So we're actually quite close to the end. I can't believe it feels like it flew by.
Well, that's my technical issues with my old iPhone.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Um, so so for folks who are watching, what's kind of one thing that you would impart or your one message you want to share with everyone as we're kind of like going through this time of change and growth, and hopefully we're all going to come out better on the other side. What's one message that you want to share?
I would say that to remain grounded in your truth, to remain grounded in your humanity. This has been a very testing time for everybody in many different ways. It's a very unique and personal experience, but at the same time, it's a collective experience worldwide that we're having, right? And so it's very easy to fall and become prey to hysteria and fear. And I mean, you can live in that space, of constant fear and hysteria, or you can ground yourself and, center yourself and then follow a path that's truthful to who you are and that's truthful to humanity. So for me, I had to make a big pivot at the end of this summer, right? So I finished up my virtual teaching, gearing up to go back to Newark Public Schools. I'm gearing up to send my kid back to a preschool. And there was so much uncertainty with the schools this summer. We didn't know if they were going to be virtual. We didn't know if they were going to be in person. All of a sudden now the CDC comes out with guidelines, and we don't know if the schools are going to follow them all to a T or if they're just suggestions. And it just became more and more unsettling for me as an educator and as a parent. And certain things weren't settling with me in terms of, educating small children and what some of these guidelines would mean, and also my own child. And I just had to really center myself and say, what do I envision my school year to look like in September? And what do I envision it to look like for my son? And as that became more clear and more clear, I started putting myself out there and finding it and manifesting it. And so 2 weeks before I was supposed to go back and before I was supposed to send him back, I resigned. And I actually secured a job as a private preschool teacher, teaching a cohort of, it's a small group. It's between 6 and 9 kids, depending on the day. Some of the kids don't come every day. And I get to teach my son in person with the other children in person, and everyone gets to engage normally. And none of us are wearing masks, and none of us are sitting in our own little spot. And for me, for 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, that was really, really highly on my list of importance. And I just didn't have it in me to teach in a space that I would be enforcing kindergarteners, first graders to not go near each other. And I wasn't clear if that would be what my job, this school year would be, because it kept shifting. But after seeing some glimpses of what the summer schools look like, I just didn't have it in my heart to do it. And so I had to really gain clarity and confidence to follow my intuition. And so I would say that to anybody, whatever your truth is, wherever you're rooted in your humanity, you have to follow that and follow your spirit and be confident in your choices. And it's 2020 time for pivots, so you got to make that pivot and jump in and do what you got to do to remain in your, in your joy and your health in mind, body, and spirit.
That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. We're rounding out the half hour. So what are things coming up or coming out that everyone should know about, and where can we find you after this interview?
Awesome. So, a couple quick plugs. We did also receive an Art Start grant from the Newark Arts this year to do some youth programming. And we are about to launch some art kits and videos for children at a very reduced rate because of that Art Start grant. And we're also going to have a couple of in-person but very small classes for youth at the Newark Print Shop. So stay tuned on that. We'll post it on our, social media channels and our website when we're ready to launch that, hopefully very soon. Of course, if you are a printmaker and you're looking for space to print, we have launched the Print Club program as we were talking about before. And if you want to book some space, go to newarkprintshop.org/print club, and that's where you can book your appointment, and also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And then also I want to plug the Montclair Art Museum summer virtual camp went so well that they asked me to teach there on Saturdays for the fall. And that class is going to kick off in October. I think we're only one slot away from filling it, but hey, if you're a 5, 6, or 7-year-old, or you're a parent of a 5, 6, or 7-year-old, it's a very fun class. I will have my co-teacher in tow, Jali, and we'll teaching. I think we're going around the world on that virtual art education experience. So we'll be making art projects based off of different places that we virtually visit. So check out that at the
Chris just posted the link there in the comments. If anybody's wondering, it's right there. You can click, get to the Print Club website.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been wonderful chatting with you. All right, I'm going to let you enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right, thank you. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Have a good night. All right, and for everybody else who's watching, you can join us here next Tuesday at 6 p.m. We'll be interviewing Leica Nuna Yawar, who is a muralist and educator as a part of the third interview in the 10 Newer Creators series. Be sure to follow us here on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for everything NJPAC. And have a wonderful evening. Good night.